Then the story goes on that early Sunday morning, just after dawn, the women went to the tomb. And this is the first point that I want to lift up, is that their fear on the way to the tomb was the fear of the inevitable. The stone sealed the tomb. The evidence was clear from the days before, that the tomb was sealed with a large stone. It was there. They saw it happen. Now, there are a lot of views to this stone. Some say that it was not so big because it would be movable, because the tombs are made, carved big enough so that you perhaps might put a family in there, like a mausoleum. And then so that you could move the stone and then move it back. Or so that you could move it out so that after the body had decomposed, you would take the bones and you would bury them in another place. But then there are those who say it was so large, it weighed a ton, so that it would take people and machines. And Mark doesn't mention anything about the official seal and the guard that was placed at the tomb like Matthew does. But it was a stone in front of the tomb, and they saw it on Friday evening, blocking the access to Jesus' body. And the women did not see it within their capacity to move it. Thus, their fear on their way to the tomb. The text says that they were worried that no one would be there to roll the stone away from the tomb, from the door of the tomb. Again, they had seen the body placed in the tomb. They saw the stone rolled in front of the tomb. That was the fact. Yet, in their preparation, it appears that they did not prepare for the stone to be rolled away. But they continued to the tomb, and as they traveled, they were concerned, they were anxious, they were fearful that their mission would be thwarted. They were afraid that their devotion would be denied because they were unable to roll this stone away. Yet, they kept walking, kept heading to the tomb. And I don't know what they thought was going to happen when they got there. Because they had seen with their own eyes that this large stone was moved in front of the door of the tomb. Which begs the question, how many obstacles get in the way of our devotion? How many times have we determined to do something for the sake of Christ only to have the door closed? How many times have we wanted to serve God in our capacity, but then the structures prevent us from serving? How many times have we thought of doing something to glorify God, but then it was brought to mind that we've never seen it done like this before, or people tell us it can't be done? But their desire, their commitment was greater than what they saw and experienced. Their desire was greater than that inevitability. Their desire was greater than the obstacles in their way. Their faith was greater than the fear that the stone would be in the way. So they continued heading to the tomb with their fear. And when they arrived, they discovered that the stone was rolled away. The thing that they feared was not there. Their present observation superseded their expectation. The inevitability of the stone blocking their way, that was gone. But then this raises another fear at the tomb, because the body of Jesus was gone. The body of their Lord was gone. This was their fear of the obvious. They had seen Jesus succumb to death. They saw him breathe his last. They saw Joseph carry the dead body to the tomb. Jesus was dead, and it was confirmed by the soldiers. Jesus was dead. And the women saw this from where they stood, watching the crucifixion, and then they saw his body. But now they looked in the tomb, they go into the tomb, they look in the tomb, and the body of Jesus was gone. Gone. Dead people don't just leave. They had heard Jesus say that he was the resurrection, but that was something far off in the future. They had heard Jesus say that he would rise again, but that was some kind of spiritual, eschatological language. Yeah, sure, Jesus, you're gonna rise, and everybody's gonna get up in the resurrection. So what had happened? What had happened? The body was gone. Somebody had stolen his body. Somebody had done something because Jesus' body had to be carried out of the tomb. Somebody had to carry it out. Jesus was dead, and they laid him in the tomb. They carried his body, laid it in the tomb. So clearly, obviously, in order for the body to not be there, somebody had to carry it out. And instead of seeing the body of Jesus, they saw a young man sitting there. This must have been frightening. Here were two obvious conclusions from their observation. The body of Jesus was gone, and we've got some young man who's sitting there in the tomb. So again, they saw something that challenged their faith. The absence of their Jesus. They couldn't see what they came looking for. What they expected was not there. It's like when I misplace something or I lose something. I remember when I first moved over to Southwest Philly, I had an old truck. And I drove all the way from Michigan and carried me through school. And I parked it across the street from where I was living. And I remember going away for like 2 weeks for the holiday, at Christmas time. And when I came back, my truck wasn't there. And I walked up and down the street. It's like, okay, I just forgot where it was parked. And I'm walking up and down the block looking for my truck. Couldn't find it nowhere. Then it became obvious to me that it was stolen. Somebody had taken my truck. Have you ever had that happen? That feeling of misplacing something? Or that feeling of losing something? It's a real sinking feeling. And it's a feeling of loss. It's like, I've been violated. Somebody came and took my stuff. It's a feeling of vulnerability. I was vulnerable to have my stuff taken. Or, have you ever planned to do something for somebody to help them? You plan, you make connections, you make arrangements, you invest your time, your effort, your money, you plan and pray only to have that person reject and toss out and disregard all of your efforts. Sometimes working with children and watching them grow, you teach them, you expose them to the larger world around them, you engage them in Christian life and values, you involve them in the life of the church and get the church to invest in them, only to find out when they grow up, they just sort of disappear. They quit coming. And then you go and ask why, and the answer is, it's just not for me. Or, hey, I don't believe that anymore. The thing that you thought would be there, the thing that you had planned for, that for which you had prepared, is no longer there. Where did it go? How did it go? What happened? The body of Jesus was gone. But you know what? They didn't just walk away. Their faith moved them to look, to wonder, and to listen in spite of their fear of the obvious. That the body of their Lord was absent. So now, they had to come to face another fear of the outcome. The fear that they would not be able to share this one last time with their Lord. They saw the young man and listened to him, and their faith kept their eyes and ears and minds open to what the young man had to say. They heard him say, "You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He's been raised. He's not here. Look, here's the place where they laid him." This was something that they had seen. They saw him crucified. They saw where they laid him. They saw that he was no longer there. But then there was this part about Jesus being raised. And so I think there's a little difficulty here. Can it be true that Jesus really rose? This is news beyond their comprehension. Because Jesus being raised, could it be something that's really true? Jesus said it would happen. But come on, really? Can it really be true now that Jesus has been raised? But then they were told to go and tell the disciples and Peter that Jesus was going to meet them in Galilee. Great news. And the women ran away in fear. They ran away in fear and they told no one. And that's the end of the story. That's where Mark leaves us. Now, most biblical scholars and theologians agree that the original text of Mark ends right here. The women ran off, and out of fear, they told no one. And that the additional verses were added about 100 years later, because people don't like that ending. They want a better ending. And the women run away in fear with the intention of keeping silent, afraid of what they had seen and heard, afraid that they would be called crazy, afraid that they would be ridiculed, afraid that they would be accused of stealing the body of Jesus, afraid that as women their testimony would be rejected, afraid because the outcome of their desire was more frightening than the desire itself, afraid that the devotion that they carried in following Jesus to Jerusalem would not be resolved. Isn't that why we have funerals? To help us resolve our grief, to help us finalize our acceptance of that loss. And they had none of that. And they ran off, afraid and grieving and unresolved. And here's the interesting thing about this story. That the faith of these women moved to keep them moving forward in the face of their fears. The faith of these women moved them to keep moving forward in the face of their fears. And at each step, there was some obstacle, some hindrance, some problem that would keep them from moving forward. But yet, they kept moving forward, step by step. There was something in front of them, something that even in their fear, they kept moving, they kept stepping, they kept walking. And you know what? Here is the good news in two parts. One, that God is prepared for any and every eventuality in our lives. God may not determine or even direct the choices that we make in our lives, but God is prepared to meet every circumstance of every and any choice that we make. The women, they made the choice to go to the tomb, knowing that the stone was there and that it was sealed. But they kept moving on faith, and God met them there with the stone rolled away. They saw the stone rolled away, but they did not stop there, but they went inside the tomb and they saw someone there other than Jesus. And again, they were afraid, but they did not run. And God met them there with the good news that Jesus was not dead, but he was risen. Jesus meets our fears of obstacles with opening the tomb. Jesus meets our fear of death with life. Jesus meets our fear of abandonment with meet me in Galilee. At each step, God had already prepared an answer for their question. At each step, God had already provided a solution. With each new challenge and each new problem, God had already made a way. With every step we make, with every choice we take, God is already there to meet us. The psalmist said, where can I go to escape from the Lord? If I go into heaven, God is there. If I go into hell, God is there. If I take the wings of the morning and go to the farthest reaches of the sea, God is already there. Even when it's dark, God is light. But here's the second part. The second part of the good news, and I think this is even more relevant to us, that the women who ran off in fear, they ran into faith. They ran off in fear and they ran into faith. Because with each step, they remembered how Jesus healed the sick. With each step, they remembered how Jesus fed the thousands. With each step, they remembered how he foretold his arrest and his crucifixion. With each step, they remembered how he said he would rise again. With each step, they remembered how much they loved him. And as they remembered, their fear turned into faith. And as they ran, their faith became like fire shut up in their bones so that they could not contain it, but that they had to tell someone. And how do I make this claim? I make this claim because now we have the testimony of those who heard their testimony. They had to tell somebody or we would not have the message of the resurrection. They had to tell somebody or this will be just another day. They had to tell somebody or there would be no report of the resurrection Sunday. And furthermore, we know that they told somebody because Jesus, when he goes and confronts the disciples, tells them, scolds them for not believing the testimony of those who had seen him. But here's the takeaway. The takeaway is this. Don't let your fear stop you. Don't get lost in your fear. Because if you keep stepping, even in your fear, know that God is right there with you and God has already prepared a way for you. Keep stepping, even in your fear, because with each step, you'll come to discover that there is faith in your fears. Keep stepping, because even in your fear, because with each step, faith grows and fear subsides. Keep stepping even in your ultimately, with each step, faith casts out the fear. I'm reminded of the 10 lepers who asked Jesus to heal them. And Jesus said, go and show yourself to the priest. And as they went, they were healed. It didn't happen right there, but as they went, they discovered that they were healed. Just like I'm reminded of the story of Naaman. Naaman, who had acquired a disease, goes to Elijah to be healed. And Elijah says, go and dip yourself in the Jordan. And he goes there, he does it one time, nothing happens. He does it a second time, nothing happens. But then the third time, he comes up out of the water and his skin is healed. Or just like the blind man who Jesus touched his eyes, and Jesus said, what do you see? And he says, I see men standing like trees. And Jesus touched him again and said, now what do you see? He says, I can see clearly now. This journey of faith is a process. It's not an instant. The women began in fear and they ended in faith. I remember when I was in high school, I go to my guidance counselor and I said, I want to go to college. And she says, well, you really don't want to do that. That's not a good choice for you. Your dad didn't go to college, your mother didn't go to college, none of your siblings went. And so she said, don't go. So I go off into the military. But the desire was still there. The desire was still there. And I began stepping in that direction. And there were those who said, they told me I wouldn't succeed. They told me, you can't cut it. They said, you would fail, that you're going to quit. And I didn't have a whole lot of faith to move forward. But I had enough faith to fill out that application and send it in. I didn't have a whole lot of faith. I didn't have a whole lot of faith to go and make the move to get things done. But I had enough faith to go up to the campus and make some living arrangements, do that financial aid form. I had just enough faith to do that. I didn't have much faith, but I had enough faith to go to class and to attend class and to do the homework and go to the office hours. I didn't have a whole lot of faith, but I had enough faith that after a few years of this, a few years of these small steps, a few years of taking these steps through fear, ultimately I was able to gain my first degree from a major academic institution. And that was just the first of many obstacles, the first of many stories of things that would get in our way, that would want to prevent us. And it looms large before us. But when we take each step in fear, that moves in our faith grows so that we can take another step. And I think that's just how it works. We start out with just a little faith. And with each fearful step, God prepares us for the next step of faith. We start out with just a little faith, and with each fearful step, God is preparing us for that open tomb. Then with a little more faith, the next fearful step, God is preparing us to see where Jesus was laid and that he's no longer there. And then with more steps in our fear, God shows us and prepares us so that we might see that Jesus is risen. And now, with a little more faith, each fearful step as we go, God is building our faith so that we can go and tell others the good news of the resurrection. That, with each fearful step and just a little faith, we can go and tell others that Jesus has not abandoned us, but wants to meet us. That's what it is. With each fearful step and just a little faith, we can go and tell others that Jesus ascended into heaven, is coming back to receive us. So yes, step in your fear. And with each step, your faith will grow. With each step, you will draw nearer to your desire. With each step, you will draw nearer and nearer to God's design and destiny for you. Because God uses our fears of obstacles, our fears of failure, our fears of rejection, our fears of not being able to measure up, our fears of not being able to have what it takes. God uses our fears as building blocks of our faith so that step by step we rise to the occasion such that when God gets us to the place where God wants us to be, we are prepared. So yes, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. But remember this. That your fear, if you face it and step in it, it leads to faith. Faith to believe, faith to move, faith to proclaim that Jesus is risen. Faith to proclaim that Jesus is real and that he lives in me. Faith to proclaim, and not only proclaim, but to live as people claimed by God as children of God. And so yes, let us face our fears. Let us embrace our fears because it's okay. Fear is not a bad thing. But rather, fear, God is able to use it. I'm reminded of the idea of chaos. In the beginning, right? In the beginning, God, the Spirit of God moves over the face of the chaos and pulls it back. And the thing is that chaos is constrained, but chaos is not destroyed. Because there's a purpose for that. Just as that there is a purpose for our fears. There's a purpose for our anxieties. And I would posit that one purpose of our fears and our anxieties is that it causes us to draw nearer and nearer to God. One purpose of our fears and anxieties is that it causes us to call upon God, not relying upon ourselves, but relying upon the power and the grace and the love of God so that we can move forward and draw nearer and nearer to whom God has called us and claimed us to be. And so let us embrace that and let God use that in us, through us, and for us so that we can be the people of God. And we can, on Easter Sunday, and the next Sunday, and the next Sunday, and the next Sunday, say, Jesus Christ is risen. I know he lives. Why? Because he lives in me.
Amen. Amen. Amen.